Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. We have the pleasure in our first segment today, out of a couple of segments, to meet with someone who's really been making New Haven tick for the last, 2 years since she came to our town. Adrian Jefferson, she's the Cultural Affairs Director for the City of New Haven, joining us by Zoom. Adrian Jefferson, welcome to Dateline New Haven. How you doing?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
It's really a pleasure to finally talk to you. Everything's been weird with COVID. You came and then COVID started, 2 years ago. And actually, partly what I want to talk to you about, how do you run cultural affairs in a city that suddenly gets plunged into a pandemic? Adrian, one thing that I loved finding out that I had no idea is that you're on with me for this segment. You're on with Babs Rawls-Ivy show on WNHH tomorrow morning. And then Lucy Gelman in the afternoon. And I had no idea. So next time we write something snarky about city government saying you guys don't even know how many meetings you have or how many pencils you're supposed to order, just remind me that we had no idea that we triple booked Adrian Jefferson.
I definitely will remind you.
Thank you. And it's a great opportunity. So, Adrian, you've been in the news. Last week, we had a story about how Connecticut has become the first city in the state with an initiative targeting cultural equity. You've been doing that. You got a whole committee of people in town doing it. I'd like you to let our listeners know what cultural equity is and what it's not.
Oh, my gosh. I love that question, first of all, because I get asked, like so many people kept asking me, why not a cultural plan? Because if you look at what most municipalities do or what most cities across the nation and arts agencies that are across the nation, when they release plans, what they usually release is a cultural plan. Now, a cultural plan usually just addresses like the vibrancy and the economics of the arts and cultural landscape.
Right, and you always have to have that made-up statistic in it where it says, like, the economists say how many people, 7.3, will recycle a dollar from arts and try to justify having arts because it'll help a landlord make money as opposed to, like, arts are good in and of themselves.
Yep, exactly. And what it does is it completely deters. And there's nothing wrong with the cultural plan, except for the fact that it completely veers away from centering Black and Brown people and other marginalized groups. So a cultural equity plan actually centers the needs of Black and Brown people, LGBTQ people, elderly, youth, low income, immigrant communities. And we're saying that what we want to do is make sure that we are redirecting the resources and amplifying the culture that is already in these communities, right? Because so many times these communities are left out of funding opportunities, they're left out of the workforce, and we're talking about $1 billion workforce. Like, a lot of people don't understand that arts and culture is a major economic engine. It's
what area are we talking about for that $1 billion? Is that city, state, federal?
So in the state of Connecticut, we are close to being a $1 billion arts industry. Wow. So in the nation, it's it's billions of dollars. Yeah. And in the city, us being the cultural capital, we contribute significantly to that $1 billion number. And so, like, for us, if we're looking at the economics of it, right, and we're talking about things like closing the racial wealth gap and providing more opportunities for Black and Brown people, there's no way that we cannot center cultural equity so that we can amplify the opportunities so that people can also thrive from arts and culture. So that's why we've centered cultural equity.
So when we're talking about thriving and who benefits and who gets to tell whose story, as Brian Slattery's story put it, are we focusing on the people who make the art? So you talked about grant opportunities for people. Are we talking about what kind of art is staged, or does that happen more organically, like when they diversify the board of Long Wharf Theater and started bringing in Andrea Smith and other kinds of new voices? Are we talking about where the culture takes place? Like, to what extent, because that's always been so interesting, people in your job, you have very limited resources, and you obviously think about how you're spending those resources. If you have grant for arts, many grants during the pandemic, you really got that money out to people. But you're also trying to influence how existing cultural institutions operate, whether it's theaters, galleries, school education programs, which you've had history in. So does your plan cover all of that, and how does that break down?
Yes, absolutely. It's like all of the above. So it's, first of all, it's number one, how do we increase the activities that are happening in arts and culture? If you look at where a lot of the activities happen, they happen downtown. Right? That's not to say that they're not happening in the neighborhoods, But what it does mean is that we're not accessibly and equitably promoting the culture that's happening in the neighborhoods. So everything's downtown. All of our major arts institutions are mostly downtown, right? So now it's central in the downtown area where mostly white, it's mostly populated by white residents, right? And so what we want to do is make sure that we are advertising all of our community. When you think of New Haven, obviously it's way more than just downtown. We have so many different neighborhoods and communities that reflect different cultures. So what we want to do is make sure that the activities and the resources like funding and money and any other type of resources that people need in order to have cultural activities are disseminated to those neighborhoods. And then I think there's this other umbrella of workforce. So if you look at who are usually the major arts leaders or the arts administrators running these cultural institutions, a lot of times they don't look like me, right? Sometimes they're not even younger, they're a little bit older. So what we're trying to do is diversify that community as well and make sure that it is a true reflection of the city of New Haven, which is a more culturally diverse
And again, that's the
landscape.
extent to which you, someone in government, have influence, right? Some things you control. You control some grant
Right.
fundings. You control appointments to commissions where you talk about policy. But a big part, I think, of what you do, tell me if I'm wrong, is influence what other people do through the position you have as sort of, you're our arts person, right? The people in New Haven, you're representing us and where you want to steer the city. I mean, do you think of it that way? Do you have specific strategies for how
Yeah.
you use your influence?
Well, it's definitely a leadership position, and it definitely has a lot of like accountability, right? And so I think it's number one, how do we hold ourselves accountable in local government? I think it's number two, how do we hold others accountable? So in this position, like when I came to this job, I completely understood what the assignment needed to be, right? We needed to really focus on and disrupting what normal arts is considered to be. And it really needed to be more of a reflection of diverse communities and a diverse population. And so with that, that means there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of uncomfortable changes for people who are used to doing things the way that they're used to doing them, right? And we're gonna challenge those assumptions. We're gonna challenge those policies and practices and put more equitable things in place. And so with that does come a huge level of influence in accountability that we are pushing onto these arts and cultural organizations, institutions, and working closely with the community and the arts activists in order to get work like this done.
So tell me about a day. So you started 2 years ago.
Yes, right in the middle of the pandemic.
Weeks before right before the world changed. Can you tell me a moment when you said, "Oh, so this is what New Haven's like," and "Oh, so this is what I'm going to need to do as the cultural affairs director"?
You know what I will say to you, Paul? Oh my gosh, there's so many moments. There's so many moments. I've had humbling moments. I've had moments where I'm getting a history lesson every second. So one thing I love about New Haven, and I've had many encounters like this, but every time I talk to a New Havener who has like been here for years, I get a history lesson. And I love the history lessons because what I learn is so much more than what's on paper, right?
We have such a
It's
great
really
we have such a great grassroots cultural history in this city.
Yes, y'all do. And the civic engagement that's here, you know, the activism, how passionate people are. I learned that really, really, really quickly in New Haven. How much people can care about their
We
community.
wrestle to the death about how tall a building is, or if they're two-way streets, and like whether Arts and Ideas really has a neighborhood pop-up, or whether it's just kind of throwing out a few pennies there.
Yes, there's so I realized that everybody always has something to say, an opinion, something to contribute. But I love that, and I think what it does, it keeps us on our toes. I think it challenges us. I think that's the way that civics works. I think hearing from people, hearing from the community about their own community, they know best. And I've learned to listen more, right? When I hear about the Dixwell area, for example, and all of the rich cultural history that is particularly in the Dixwell area, it's almost like the Harlem Renaissance of
That's what
Connecticut.
it was. That's what it was during the Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
Yeah.
Like these are stories that need to be preserved and brought to light. These are stories that, we owe our babies, here in this community. They should know about it. They should just know how special where they live is, right? And actually have a sense of pride and belonging based on those stories. So that's one of the things I would say that sticks out the most, that I've just that I've learned so much from being here. And I've quickly felt like I'm a part of the community, in which I
Right.
am. I am
That
now.
happens fast for sure, and everybody
Yeah,
knows you
it
now. And
does.
can you think of a particular day? It doesn't have to be the day where you said, "Oh, so this is what it's going to be like here," or "There's a day."
Oh
This.
my gosh. Paul, I have to tell you, everything has been a whirlwind. So like, for example, I started February 3rd,
Mm-hmm.
2020, and I definitely hit the ground running. And then in March, that's when the pandemic came. And I think there was a time because we had to switch. So we had to switch from saying, all right, we're going to do the cultural equity plan, and that's what we're going to focus on. We had to kind of switch to be able to help mitigate the damage of the pandemic. Community resiliency and really helping, and the arts and culture played a central role in a lot of the community work that was done as soon as the pandemic hit. And I think the moment that I remember is when we were all, and it was a whole bunch of city officials, we were on a call, on a Zoom, talking about how it was going to be all hands on deck, right? And how we were all going to have to really play a part in, again, mitigating the damage during the pandemic. And so for me, that was an interesting shift with understanding local government, right? It moves fast, and the needs of the community move fast, and we have to be responsive. And I think I realized in that moment that my role was going to be a lot bigger than just being the director of cultural affairs
Right.
for the city of New Haven.
How do we get through a pandemic or any crisis without the arts? Without.
I think we've learned that you can't.
And
You
and
can't do it.
we're listening to Adrian Jefferson, who's the new cultural affairs director for the city of New Haven. Not new anymore. It's been a couple of years now. She's the long time. We've been the new way we measure time.
I don't. Somebody told me the other day, they were like, "Yeah, you're not new anymore.
No, you're not new
You've
anymore.
been here."
And thank you for Bochum, who wrote in that we're apparently, because of Zoom, we're not synced, Adrian. I'm sorry about that, but we're going to do our best
Oh
with
no,
that.
we're not sinking.
We're doing our best. Sometimes I think it's looking a little better now. That's why I always we're looking forward to when everyone's comfortable coming in the studio for that reason. So, Adrian Jefferson, tell us a little bit about you. So I've looked you up a little bit. You grew up in the South. You've been in arts forever. You started out in local television and production in Miami. You were the state coordinator in Connecticut for the National Endowment of Arts Poetry Out Loud program. Have you ever been? I did Make Music Day, which was one of those great kind of grassroots events. What got you into the arts? Did you play music growing up? Were you in plays? Did you draw stuff? What was the?
Yeah, that's what it was exactly. Actually, I'm a writer. I started off as a literary artist, writing, and I've been writing since the age of 11. And I was winning awards at 11 and all of that.
What kind of stuff were you writing?
Oh my gosh, we were doing short stories. I actually did oratory, so I used to compete in oratory competitions. So I would write speeches, and then also got into playwriting and script writing and film writing and songwriting. So I've
cool.
kind of done almost everything, but novelty writing. I of course want to write a book one day, but I haven't done that.
Tell me about one of your plays. What happens in the play?
Okay, so I was a part of this group called the Writer's Block, based in New London, Connecticut. And the Writer's Block is a small arts organization that ignites social change initiatives and works with a lot of young people from the community. And a long time ago, I was one of those young people, just kind of lost and searching for a way out. And honestly, the arts really is what saved my life and changed the trajectory of the direction that I would go. And so we wrote about so many different things from social change initiatives. So I had a brother who passed away when it was in 2000. I was 13 years old.
Sorry to hear
and
that.
That really kind of changed. Thank you. And it happened, a while ago, but it really did impact. It really affected me and the way I thought of life. But eventually being able to tap into writing is really, really what grounded me and really kind of, again, changed the trajectory that I would go on.
Can I ask you a little more about that arts changing trajectory? So by that time you were an adult, right? When you wrote that? Maybe I'm wrong. When you were in New London. When you
I was not. I was not an adult. So here's the thing with I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay.
What are the odds of that?
Was raised in New London until I was 17 years old. And then I left and went to Miami, Florida, and I was there for 12 years.
And then
I
came
back to Connecticut.
What brought you back?
I got a job actually as the executive director of the Writer's Block, the organization that I was just talking about. I got a job as the executive director. And then from there, the state of Connecticut Office of the Arts picked me up, and then I worked for in Hartford for a few years, and then now I'm here in the city of New Haven.
So it sounds like you're someone who, when you wrestled with some of life's challenges, you found that the arts, writing, other forms of arts were a good way to deal with it and grow. And then you went to the exact same place where that happened, where you became somebody who makes those opportunities available for other people.
Yeah.
So you became
Absolutely.
an arts administrator, arts leader, arts organizer. What happened to you writing? Do you still go home and write a song at night or a play, or you just too whooped?
When I was working as an executive director for the Writer's Block, I definitely was still more in a creative space. The more I got into like arts administration and arts policy, and the more I got into like becoming a funder and creating grants and being a grant maker, really that takes up so much of your time and your capacity, so much of your energy when you are a public servant who really, really centers serving people as the priority. So when I come home, I am like trying to be with my family. I'm usually like depleted. I'm reading. I read a lot of books.
What are you reading now?
Oh my gosh, the Will Smith book is a book I just
Okay,
finished.
that looked kind of
Will,
interesting. Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It is honestly one of the best autobiographies I have ever read.
It sounds like he wasn't trying to
funny.
build himself up from the reviews. It sounded like he's trying to talk about his experience in a way that would be useful, maybe to other people in arts even, and dealing with racial equity, but not really trying to say, look at what a hero Will Smith is. He's already had enough of that in his life.
Yeah,
Is that the way it comes
no,
out?
he wasn't doing that at all. It was more talking about his journey of resiliency. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these people who are in the limelight, they have a story that is a story of resilience and perseverance. You know, it's like it's what you see is not what you get. There's so much deeper than the story. So for the first time, I feel like we're really getting a chance to unpack those layers of what makes Will Smith Will Smith.
In terms of what makes Adrian Jefferson, you're talking about like when you grew up and writing through this Writer's Block program in New London, working with young writers, and then you came back to run it. Was there ever a day where you saw a young person, you could think of a very specific person, and you remembered being in that person's shoes as a kid, and remember what happened with the kid in the Writer's Block program? And anything jump to mind?
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't say, even though I do have some stories of the Writer's Block, I would say more particularly during my work in Miami. So in Miami, I worked at Alonzo Mourning Charities as the drama instructor. I built their drama program from scratch, and then I also instructed. And so I used to work in Overtown. And if you know anything about Miami, you know, there's so many different pockets, but Overtown is highly impoverished. It literally used to be the Harlem Renaissance of the South. And then they built a bridge and, redlining happened. And so a lot of these young people have never even been exposed to the beach. And the beach is 5 minutes from Overtown.
Wow.
Okay. So for me, when I worked in that area, it was very, very eye-opening as to the needs, as to how people were living, but also to the love in the community that was just there. So I specifically remember, I'm not going to say her name, just in case.
No, you don't have to say her name.
No, but I specifically remember a young lady who I still consider a mentee. A lot of my babies from Overtown, they're older now, but those are still my babies, and they're my mentees. And I remember specifically one young lady who we were in the middle of a drama rehearsal and practicing the script. And this was new to them. Like this was their first time kind of being exposed to, writing a script, performing, being on stage, being in the limelight. And she was just like, I don't want to do this, like, forget it. And she walked off. And I remember that happening to me, being kind of like scared, fighting the fact that I belonged in the arts, that I had a place here, that this was going to be different than anything I ever knew before. And what I saw in her was fear, right? It was fear, it was frustration, feeling like she wasn't going to be able to be good enough, and all of which were lies. It was all things in her head. And so I saw myself in her in that moment, pulled her to the side. We had a conversation. But in that moment, I definitely feel that is a direct example of just kind of seeing a reflection of myself and someone else, and being able to tell her, I've been there, I've done that, and you can do this. And to this day, she actually ended up going to school for the arts, and now actually, I believe, works as a dance instructor in the arts.
Way to go! That feels good.
Yeah.
Touch another life that way. And we're talking to Adrian.
Listen, it's a domino effect. that's how I feel about any type of work that touches people. It's like it's a domino effect. Somebody can impact your life. Somebody, I had a mentor who changed my life, who introduced me into the arts landscape. And it is a domino effect because I was able to work with so many other people, young people or peers and colleagues even, who I feel like I've been able to help or play a role in their life, and they've been able to impact other people. So it's all a domino effect. We're all connected.
All right, we're connecting with Adrian Jefferson, Culture Affairs Director of the city. So you talked about people feeling like I don't belong here, the fear that I don't belong in the arts. It's fair to say your mission here is to have more people feel they belong in the arts and play a role in the arts, right? Whether that's your old jobs, that's what you do in New Haven. Let's talk about this cultural equity plan you have and the pledge you gave everybody. From my understanding in Brian's article, it's already taken place in concrete ways, because as an editor, I'm looking like, what does this mean for like a person? So you had the Creative Sector Relief Fund, coordinated by the Arts Council of Greater New Haven, which got many grants out to artists quick, right, when the pandemic started, so they keep doing what they do. You had a one-day virtual event, unapologetically radical.
Yes.
You had the Entrepreneurship Decoded event with an anti-racist pledge, a 6-week program with Collab New Haven for people who want to start creative businesses and get $1,000 seed money and help, advice. And you have an upcoming January 19th event for leaders of arts organizations to explore tools and methods for evaluating progress and incorporating cultural equity practices into their organizations. You want to tell me a little bit about the specifics of how some of those events unfold and how that fits into your cultural equity mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, a lot of this work began before we even released the Cultural Equity Plan. I think the number one thing that we saw, especially with the pandemic, which exacerbated the inequities in Black and Brown communities, is the ability to respond right now, right? We're not waiting. These matters are very urgent and important to get resources into our community. And so when we created, for example, the Creative Sector Relief Fund, which gave close to 500 artists, mostly Black and Brown
500?
artists in the community. Yeah,
500?
close to 500.
And how much money? How many they each get?
Close to 500.
That's a lot.
Yes, it is. It is a lot. It is a lot. We were able to get like small grants, of relief, $500 on average, $500 each. And we raised the money between the city and the Arts Council. We raised the money through private donors and grants in order to support this. But I think that's an example, because I have to tell you, and I'm proud about this. I was talking to other colleagues in like Rhode Island or Boston or wherever else in the nation, and they weren't able to get immediately a creative relief funding approved.
So how did we do it? How did we do it fast?
We had the support of Mike Piscatelli.
That's the city economic development. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was very empowering. He said, "Let's do it." Let's do it. And so I really feel like he was like listening to my guidance as a person who really like is an expert in this area, of arts and arts administration, as well as my colleagues who we worked with to partner this. Like he really listened to what we were saying the needs are based on what the community needed, but also what we're able to do in the arts to help mitigate the damage to our economy and to our arts. And that type of support is central when it comes to moving policies and grants like that forward.
And how much was the typical grant of those nearly 500?
About $500 is typically what they would get. It ranged from $500 to $1,000.
And can you give me an example of some things that happened as a result?
Yeah, people were able to pay their rent. So what we did was we didn't put restrictions on it. And I think this is another reason some other cities may have been having problems, is we didn't put restrictions on it saying that you're going to get this money so you can continue to commission your art, right? It was more like you can use it for that to continue to be a practicing artist, or you can use it for something that you need to live, like put groceries on your table or pay your rent, for that month. And actually, that's what a lot of artists did. And so it further amplifies the fact that when we're talking about what it means to be an artist, it's not just talking about making art. It's talking about everything that they will need to sustain and to live, which includes housing, affordable housing, and groceries and childcare, and thinking about the whole package. So this program was really able to support the livelihood of the artist, especially during a really difficult time.
No, it's interesting, Adrian. I think about generations before this one, when we saw this cycle in cities, and it did happen a bit in the 80s in New Haven, where the artists move in, they're creative, a community develops. We've had those patches in New Haven, whether it was Erector Square, whether it was downtown, the nice square before it got built up.
Yeah.
There's a section in Fairhaven, and of course, New Hallville and Dixwell, where the artists make the real estate more valuable. They start the galleries. Ninth Square used to be that, by the way. And
I didn't know that. Wow.
like they used to have
I did
these
not know that.
lofts on Chapel Street. Didn't look like it looks now. And you had like underground theater groups. You had the galleries. You had Upper State Street was like that. And then a cycle happens where government markets it, and then the artists get priced out. So you gave them grants for a pandemic to stay. And some people say that that's not a good way for cities to develop. That's gentrification. Other people say that's the nature of artists, like the Church Street buildings that they used to live in. Then they had to get evicted because they actually weren't paying rent, and now they can charge rents in the clubs. And some people think it's okay for arts to be on the move within a city and organically find its place. It needs to be a little bit underground to thrive. How do you see that from a position now that you're obviously someone very committed to the grassroots and the people who are left out? Do you, once you include them, are you starting them in a process where they're eventually being used to gentrify?
That is such a great question. I actually have a lot to say around this.
And that's not at all
topic.
about you. It's not at all. I mean, I salute everything you're doing. I'm wondering how you think about that.
No, I don't take it. No, I don't take it like that. I have a lot to say about it, period, because I've seen this exact thing you're talking about happen. And I've specifically seen it happen. Obviously, I spend a lot of time in Miami, so I've seen it happen in Miami. And what I would like is for us to have a culturally thriving city that does not gentrify. You know, that if anything uplifts the community here, the authenticity, the authenticness of our city, and to have people be attracted to that. And so I think when a lot of developers move in, right, they're not thinking about our community. And so what we've been doing is being in conversation at a foundational level of how the community must be involved, not once things are built up, right? Not once it's almost there, right? But no, at the blueprint phase, to avoid the issues that you just laid out.
Like I always wondered whether New Haven lost an opportunity not doing that in past generations. Like I remember in New Hallville, and I'm talking now for the first 2 decades of this century, you had Winfred Rembert there, and he was one of those amazing folk artists. I just found him by accident because I was reporting on something else. And he was doing works of leather carvings about lynchings in the South and his whole life that were amazing quality art that became worldwide known, subject to 2 documentaries, a book. He died recently. It was and he was in a house that was not in very good condition on New Hall Street, doing it every day. And then he traveled the country where in galleries they pay tens of thousands of dollars for his art. And it was only 20 years after that began that he ever spoke in a single New Haven classroom. And then when some of the abandoned industrial spaces right near his house were filled by galleries, recording studios, and this wasn't Dixwell, this was New Hallville, I was always wondering, well, did New Haven miss an opportunity to market what was happening in New Hallville to try to encourage, because he was a great teacher, encourage other up-and-coming artists and kind of bring it up a little bit in consciousness so that other people like to shop, because you've done something with some of the commercial properties to sell some of the wares and have it become a place where people have a lot of money come from other places in? Or do you leave enough alone sometimes and just let that kind of spirit evolve on its own? And where would that be now?
I think it's the latter. It's so funny you're bringing this up. I was just in a conversation. There's a new director of tourism in the state of Connecticut. Her name is Noelle, and she's amazing because she's coming with this perspective of cultural tourism and what really attracts people here to the state. And the one thing that I really like about the conversation that we had was about how important it is to highlight the authentic type of arts and cultural work that is happening in the city. So no shame to like the Mystic Aquarium, or no shame to like Arts and Ideas, who does great work. But how are we also uplifting community programming and also realizing that that is a major attraction for people? They don't want to come to Connecticut and see the same things that they've been seeing for 25 years. They want to see something different, original, authentic to the community. That is the experience that people want. And so we really need to invest more into these experiences, these cultures and communities, period. Like that needs to happen, not just because that's the right thing to do, but also from an economic perspective and from a tourism perspective. So I think that you're absolutely right. And I also think that this is tied to like I would love to see cultural districts created all throughout the city of New Haven.
I always wondered about that.
I would listen. Dixwell is a great area to.
And it's going to
do
have
it.
the name Monterey in it, right? To remember the jazz club.
Yeah, we can. Listen, we could do, I think that this is something in the making. It would take some time and of course a lot of community input. But if I'm just visioning and imagining, Dixwell, Fairhaven, I would say, we have Audubon Street already, but how do we bring some more energy to that area? And if you look at cultural districts and the history of cultural districts, like Wynwood in Miami, it did displace people. And so I believe we can do cultural districts without displacing people and do it in a way that actually centers and celebrates the community that's already there. There's a way to do it. I believe Philadelphia has done it, and they've done it really well. I believe we can do that here in New Haven.
Whoa, that is a great note to end on. I salute you. I'm behind you 100%, and good luck making that happen. Or some semblance thereof.
I hope it's going to happen, I really do.
Well, you won't be alone if you try. Adrian Jefferson, Cultural Affairs Director of the City of New Haven. So great to chat with you. Folks, tune back in tomorrow morning at Love Babs Love Talk to hear her speak with Adrian some more. And then Lucy Gelman on Arts Talk in the middle of the day tomorrow. It's a real pleasure to speak to you, Adrian Jefferson. Thanks for coming on Dateline New Haven.
You too, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Good luck with all the great work you're doing in the city. We're going to take a break and then come back with U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal talking about what he just found out in Ukraine, where he was this week, meeting with the president of that nation as they try to stare down a possible invasion by Russia and what that means for us in the U.S. We're going to take it on this segment with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio.